All right, so now we're on farmers. So we're on depressed condition of farmers. The only thing I want to add that I left off that last one because it's on the back page is a loss of confidence in spending. So it goes really into that idea that I said, like, as you saw people around you getting laid off in that first little activity we did, you're losing confidence in the economy. Some people might have that right now. Everyone keeps talking about this impending recession that the United States might be going through. So they're holding onto their money a little bit tighter, making different decisions because they're worried about what's to come. And when we have loss of confidence, less spending means less demand, and you got that downward spiral. So within cause 4 and 6, I want you to kind of think about which one, if you were presented with that one, you might be writing on. Kind of if you are actually listening, listen here. One of these causes, sorry, will for sure be one of them that I put on the prompt. Okay. I know I'll be monitoring whether you watch on EdJoin or Edpuzzle, I'm sorry, but whether you listen or not, if you're listening now, you have a little key. At least one of them, if not both of, from causes 4, 5, or 6 are going to be in the in-class prompt. All right. And here's a little note to you as well. The Dust Bowl is not one you're going to be able to write on. And I'll explain why in a second. So depressed condition of farmers. I've been talking a lot about this. This goes into the overproduction, but we're looking really just at farmers for this one. Farmers were hurt right after World War I ended. They made a killing, a great deal of money during the war. They needed them, and so farmers were expanding their industry, their land, if you will. They were going to get the newest, greatest technology to help in the farming industry, whether it's a tractor or something of that regard. So they're able to grow more, faster on more land. And the need was there, and our government really pushed and encouraged them to do so. War ended, and it almost instantly brought an end to them. So the farmers started, it felt the impacts of the war almost right away. And so, as then the United States, everyone outside the farming community started to be impacted, it hurt them only more. So, they were working for the first portion of the 1920s, trying to just survive this post World War I situation, readjusting their supply while also still trying to pay back the banks for the loans they got out for more land or more technology. Because that's during the war, they went and purchased new land. That's a mortgage from the bank. They went and purchased tractors. That is a loan from the bank. So some of them were able to stay afloat and still pay that back. Others of them were not able to do so. And so they started to foreclose on their land as the farms really took a hit, or the United States for it. And before, what they would do is, because supply and demand, you don't need to be like well versed in supply and demand. I'm sure you've heard those terms before, but you as a business owner want the supply and demand to equal up, cross at the right points where you're producing just enough that maybe even creating a little bit of a demand for your product, which will drive the prices up. If you overproduce something, especially something in the farming industry that is going to expire before you can sell it, that's a real problem. And so, what farmers are doing here in this picture is they are trying to reduce the supply of things to raise prices. So, they are destroying people's product in order, let's just go with like tomatoes. I don't know why that came, or milk was a big one here, that they would kind of steal. They're stopping a car here, and they, if that person had milk that they were trying to transport to, along the supply chain, they're going to pour the milk out so that there's less milk on the market, so that the supply and demands match up. And of course, people are starving. I was like, I got a way for you to get rid of your supply. Feed it to me for free. But that's not going to help anything in the long run. You need it to help the farmers readjust their supply while still being able to pay their banks and feed their families as well, make a living for it. So there was a huge toll. Before the 1920s, agriculture had been the backbone of the American economy, and really, honestly, still today it is. We find ways post Great Depression to help keep farmers farming and wanting to farm, and being able to actually make a living off of it. So we subsidize today. It's 2023, but back Here, we did not subsidize for them. So we saw them really declining and it having a severe impact on them. So they kept borrowing because of underconsumption, though, they were defaulting on their loans. And if you remember the banking situation, that was even worse. And then banks attempt to recoup their money. Okay. And we talked about that for the bankings, foreclosing in particular. And they ended up really taking a loss. So banks in the farming industry or farming areas of the United States, like the wheat belt and such, were closing sooner than banks in the bigger cities, but they're often linked together. So they started to trickle out and hurt outside the just the farming areas. So by 1920, many banks collapsed under the combined pressure of farmers, ongoing economic problems, and stock market crash. So here's a public auction picture for a piece of land. They're trying to sell what they can before they get out. I hear you guys don't read Grapes of Wrath anymore, which is sad. And it's all about, this time frame. All right, this is farming during the Great Depression. So as you can see on here, do not write the paragraph on there. Just take notes because you need to know about this. Something called the Dust Bowl. Between 29 and 33, post-stock market crash, farmers' income dropped by 50% and property values decreased by billions of dollars. And the impact on this area of the like Oklahoma area is the Dust Bowl. So think about when you guys were doing the farming game. Okay, we did this first semester. Lots of fun. Some of you guys end up losing land. Some of you guys made money off of it. But what you were doing, and at the end of that, I told you guys to hold on to this knowledge that you created the Dust Bowl. Okay, so your grandkids now are experiencing the Dust Bowl because of how we depleted the land during the Homestead Movement West. Excuse me. We were growing product that shouldn't have been in that area. We hadn't really adapted to the wheat area. We were trying to grow things like cotton and things, and not knowledgeable enough with how to let the land rest for a little bit. Then we have this huge drought that took place. And then also we had windstorm. So, I mean, these farmers have been suffering. It's so sad to think about it. Like the 1920s, they are just like holding on, like for hope that they will recover. And they're like, we're farmers by heart. We're going to keep it going. And government's trying to convince them. And then it was like, someone was like, what can we do to make it worse? Here we go. How about the Dust Bowl? And just made it the situation for them even worse. You can see here in this back picture, this used to be lush farmland, and these three individuals are running out of the dust storm that would hurt and almost be suffocating. And if you think about what, fertilizers and things like that of the soil, and now you're kind of digesting it, there was a lot of health issues that arose from the Dust Bowl. So those who were just scraping by and trying to keep their land finally gave up. A lot of them, millions lost their farm between 30 and 34, and they decided to go to California, a lot of them. Californians who are dying to find work themselves don't like more people coming and trying to take jobs. So I doubt you've ever heard the term Okies, since you don't read Grapes of Wrath anymore, but it was a negative term used by Californians to reference people who they figured were from Oklahoma or that region there, coming to California and just creating some competition for jobs there. So it created a really unhealthy situation there. And we emerged from that with better ideas of how to function with the land and take care of it. So things like this do not happen anymore. This is a storm taking place. These two friendly faces are probably Okies just trying to get to California and figure out how to feed their families here too. Little guys. They don't even have a car, so they're just going to walk to California and look for jobs and food along the way. They're going to do that as a collaborative nature. And one of the most famous pictures from the Great Depression is this. There's a wonderful book about this. It's has layers of truth and not truth to it. It's called Mary Coyne, if you would like to read it. The full picture of this is she's also nursing a third child, but that seemed inappropriate and actually was illegal in some areas, even though you don't see any nudity. You just see that she's feeding a child that might be a little bit older than you would think, but that was her one way of providing nutrients and food to her child. And someone was paid through the New Deal, we'll talk about that later, to go and take pictures of what these Hoovervilles, this is the negative term for where people were living in shanty towns and such. And so someone was getting paid. They took this picture, and it just really represents what it was like. Her husband is nowhere to be seen, and no one really knew. I want to say he ended up finding out that he had like died right before or right afterwards, something like that. And her children and her, filthy, hungry, depressed, concerned. She was quite young, but looks older. Okay. I know to you, 32 might seem really old, but it's young. Okay. I saw and approach the hungry and desperate mother. This is the photographer, as if drawn by a magnet. I do not remember how I explained my presence or my camera to her, but I do remember she asked me no questions. I made 5 exposures, working closer and closer from the same direction. I did not ask her name or history. She told me her age, that she was 32. She said that they had been living on frozen vegetables from the surrounding fields and the birds that her children had killed. She had just sold the tires from her car to buy some food. There she sat in the lean to tent with her children huddled around her, and seemed to know that my picture might help her. And so she helped me. This was sort of equality. There was sort of a quality to it. She ended up, if I remember also from it, never getting really any money from this picture. The photographer ended up winning prizes, came with money, but because they couldn't really identify who this woman was as easily as, put it out on Facebook or Twitter or whatever, and you find them, that she didn't get anything from this, but the photographer, not to blame her, but, became well known from it. All right. So when you guys come in, you are going to be, and I'll describe this more in class, but you will be provided with 2 of these 6 to write on. You don't know which 2. I guarantee at least one of them is going to be cause 4 or 6 or 5. I did that, in that order for it. Maybe even both of them. And I'll describe more about the kind of expectations with what you're writing about, but it's cause and consequence. So make sure that when you're kind of thinking about it, you're able to talk about that cause, the little background of it, maybe like trickle down, like explain trickle down a little bit, maybe a little bit of the intent of it, but then the reality of it and how it ended up impacting all Americans or all industries really for it. So, all right, we'll talk more in class about that.